Hi, it's Andy again, and I have another beginning Java for Android developers tutorial. In this tutorial, we're going to go over some loops. Um, what these allow you to do is run a series of commands with some set parameters. So, like a Boolean value, um, like the in the example, I'm going to actually show you how to print 0 to 9 in 4 different types of loops. It's really just two loops with some two modifications to it. There's the while loop. So while something is either not true or true, um, do something and then eventually modify it so that it stops the loop. So eventually, what we're going to do is we're going to start with an integer of 0 and have it go all the way to 9. And once it reaches 9 or a value less than 10, we're going to stop that loop. We're going to do that example for all of these, but the while loop is going to be while it's less than 10, we're going to increment it every time. Now, the do while loop is a modified version of the while loop where it guarantees you to run a command once, at least once, before um, it actually closes the loop, while the while loop might not actually ever be true. So, like if we have an integer, we say it's 0, and then we have like while the integer is greater than 0 and less than 10, that would never run. So the do while loop allows us to at least run it once and ensure that we at least run the command once, and then you know once we're done we close off that loop. The for loop is very similar but allows you to kind of encompass everything all in one. uh, in this, we're going to set our integer of 0. Then we're going to set our parameters while it's less than something. And then what we're going to do to it, so we're going to increment it by 1. It's probably the most common use of the for loop that you'll see. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have an array and use that for the enhanced for loop. And we're going to go through an array, and for each value in the array, um, display that integer's value. So we're going to have an array of integers. So let's go into the code. Right now, all I have is 4 buttons that we're going to use to run each command. In our activity, none of these are actually doing anything yet. We have our 4 methods that we're going to run for each button. So let's initialize each button right now. So while loop equals button find v by r.id dot while loop. Okay. Do while loop equals okay. So now that these are initialized, we can actually set them to have actions. So let's set their on click listener. So when we click it, we want it to do something. So while loop set new on click listener. And if you let it populate its the data for you, it kind of makes it very easy. The command that we want to run is actually on this onClick method for the onClick listener. So this is the while loop, so we want to actually run the while loop. Okay, and we're going to do that for the remaining 3 buttons. So do while loop set onClick listener, the do while loop. Okay. For loop. And it's pretty smart. If you've done that same command, the onClick listener, it kind of puts that to the top of the list because it's kind of figuring you want to probably do that. So that's why it has that at the top. It's not alphabetical. It's kind of predicting what you want to do. So we want to do now the last one is enhanced for loop dot set on click listener new on click listener the enhanced for loop. All right. So our while loop, it's going to be pretty simple. So while, or let's set our integer. So int I is equal to 0 while I is less than 10. So it's going to rifle through the integer. So right now this is a true statement because I is equal to 0. So it will fire off this first time. So while the integer is less than 10, we want to, let's do a log. So log.I. We're going to set this to testing. And let's print out a string. So I is equal to plus I. And then we don't want this to be an infinite loop, so let's increment it, I plus plus. Because if we were to leave this and actually click on that button, we would probably crash our computer, not only the program. And what I've done here is I've included this testing field into this log tag regex in here, and that'll filter out all, and we're selecting info. So this is what that .I, this is an info log. We're filtering out the testing, so that's what we're using this string for. And so it's only going to print out like the time and then this string, whatever it is, when we do this. Okay, so now let's do our do loop. So int I is equal to 0. Now we haven't kept our I, the same integer throughout the entire thing because we want to test this each time. So this is a different allocated memory than this integer, even though they have the same value. Since it's not a global integer, like not one that we've specified up top here, like the buttons do, it's not going to it's not going to be the same memory. If we wanted to run this a little bit more efficient, we could make this a global integer and set it to 0 for each time this runs. So I'm just showing you how this works. It's not the same integer. When we click the button, it'll run a separate command for each one. So it's not using the global integer. Because if I were to set this, if I click this while loop and run it, and then try to click any of the other ones, it won't work because we have the same integer here, and it's already 10. So let's do this one. So do, and we do want to do something, so we put that there, and then we have our while I is less than 10. So we want to do that same log.I testing. Let's print out what I is equal to. And a nice thing is that this actually converts this automatically to a string, this integer, when we add it like that to a string. So we don't actually have to, string that value of and then I. It will convert that for us. And again, we have to increment our integers to stop the loop eventually. Okay, so now this is the for loop. Now the nice thing about the for loop is that we can include all of this into one line. So that's what's really snazzy about the for loop. So for I is equal to 0, or sorry, I have to allocate it. So int I is equal to 0. I is less than 10. I plus plus. And then we're going to do our log.I testing 2 plus I. Now I don't have to increment it because I'm actually incrementing it right here. So every single time this runs, we've initialized the variable. We've specified what we want it to be when we want to stop this loop, and how we're going to eventually stop this loop by incrementing it. So there's three statements that are required in your for loop for this type of loop. So this is going to run 10 times as well. So it's going to run for the first time. It's going to increment it as many times as needed until this value is succeeded. So once we reach 10, we don't run it anymore. Okay, and now the enhanced for loop, this is going to look kind of weird. It's usually used for strings, but we can use it for whatever. So we're going to make an array, integers, okay, equals new array of integers. And we're going to start with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So here are our 10 integers. Yep. All right. And then for int I integers, we want to do the same as above. So let's copy this. I should have done this before. Now again, I don't actually have to increment this value because I've incremented manually here. So what this is going to do is going to pull off every integer inside this array. So it's going to start off at 0 and go all the way to 9. And then what we're going to do is for each integer in there, we're going to display its value. So it's going to start at 0 because our place in the array is 0. And then go all the way up to 9. So this looks good. Let's run this and see what it does. Okay, I have my emulator running, so I don't have to wait for it to go. So we already have this logcat set up. Let's run it. All right. So when we did the while loop, we can see that we start at 0 and we end at 9. So that's good. That's exactly what we wanted it to do. Now let's clear this and run the do while loop. All right, same thing, 0 to 9. So that's running this code right here. Now the for loop, let's clear this logcat again. Awesome. Same thing. That's this one right here. And let's class the last one. Beautiful. All right, so we've now done our 4 different types of loops for pretty much the same thing. This last one would be very useful if you're pulling data from the internet and you have like a JSON dictionary or something like that, and you want to pull off like every single item from it and set it to a variable. That's probably where this one is going to be most helpful. The for loop, this is probably the most common loop you'll see. It exactly is written here. The int I is equal to 0 when it's less than 10 and increment it. This is very common, exactly the way it is. I just wanted to kind of show you the exact same thing can be done with all 4 loops, loop types. The main difference between these two obviously is we are guaranteed to run this at least once, and we do that beforehand. Now this one, what we do is we test to see if the value is true, and then we run it as many times as needed until this is no longer true. All right, so hope this video helps you out in kind of reading some code that you see online while you're trying to learn some Android programming. If you have any questions, don't don't be shy. Feel free to leave comments below. All right. Have a good day.